Vach. We are on Daf Chav Gimel Amid Beis. We're learning as a schus for Shlema Filan Chaya Baserech and Shira Bashalamis. We're at the two dots, about 10 lines from the bottom. Continuing from the Mishnah. The Mishnah was listing all the types of ways of doing an avodah that would be mechal the avodah, that would make the avodah not work anymore. So one of them was yoshif. If someone does an avodas hadam, the avodah, which is the operative part of a carbon, is the dam, the shchita kabbalah ilacha and zrika. If they do it sitting, it passes the avodah. Minolan, where does this come from? Amarav Nachman. They say they changed Rav Nachman to someone who else. What is it? I forgot who we changed it to. Rav Huna Amarav. Amakra Lamid Lasharis. The pasuk says, Ki boy bacha Hashem lekecha mikol shvatecha la'amid l'sharis b'shem Hashem hu barav kol hayamim. The Baruch Shalom chose the kehanim la'amid l'sharis. So la'amid l'sharis means the shiris, the service in the Beis Hamikdash should be done la'amid b'charta v'lo yeshiva. You have to do it standing and not sitting. Tan Rabban la'amid l'sharis mitzvah. From this pasuk, it will tell you that it's a mitzvah to do it standing as opposed to doing sitting. But as we know, b'derech klal and kodshim, when we just say one time, that's only a mitzvah. It's only lechatchila. When the pasuk continues and says, "V'sharis b'shem Hashem alikav b'chol echav halavim ha'oimdim sham l'fnei Hashem," that's telling you shana lavakasav la'akav. That's a repeating in order to tell you that it's la'akav, that it's required. Amalei Rav of Nachum Michti Yoshev Kazar Dami. We're saying Lamed L'Sharis in order to be. This is all part of the instructions to the Kayin. So we say those who follows the instructions are doing what the Kuna requires. If not, they become like a zar. So Yoshev is like a zar. So Yoshev is kazar dami. Umachal avodah. And part of that is that since we treat a kayan sitting like a zar, it's going to be meichal the avodah. It's going to make the avodah ineffective. Ema mazar b'misa Yoshev b'misa. Maybe it should also be compared to a zar, in that a zar who does avodah is mechuyev misa b'dei shamayim. Maybe a kain who does it b'yeshiv is also mechuyev misa b'dei shamayim. Alama Tanya aval arel oinen yoshev. Although arel oinen and yoshev, like we said in the Mishnah, are mechal avodah, b'misa einam b'misa. They're not mechuyev misa ela b'azhara. It's only an azhara. It's only that they're not allowed to do it, but there's no misas bezdin. Misas b'dei shamayim. Why is that? So the Gemara says the reason is mishum dahavi mechutz begadim v'shaloi rachat yadayim reglayim shnei ksuvin haboin ke'echad. Because mechutz begadim, by mechutz begadim it also says that he's going to be mechal the avodah, and he's not. And they're going to be mechuyev misa b'dei shamayim, and it also says like I be someone who didn't wash his hands, that he's also going to be mechal the avodah and mechuyev misa b'dei shamayim. Having shnei ksuvin habon ke'echad, so it becomes two ksuvin habon ke'echad. V'chol shnei ksuvin habon ke'echad ein melamnin. Anytime you have two ksuvin that are telling you the same thing, that's overkill, and therefore we say, since it says by both of those two that they're choyev misa b'dei shamayim, that means but not anything else. So you can't learn out the others. Now it's a little strange because we just said a pasuk by Yoshev, which we said is like a zar, And now we're saying Shnei Ksuvim Gaboin Ka'echad. We don't say anything about the Zar. Why isn't the Zar one of the Shnei Ksuvim Ka'echad? Now this bothered me, and the Shita Mekubetza says that essentially a Mechusa Begadim is not Bekihunov. So it's also a version of saying he's like a Zar. So it's essentially the same thing. What about according to Mandama that says even if you have Shnei Ksuvim Gaboin Ka'echad, that it is Malamed? You don't say that means that you can't learn anything else. So why do we come to the conclusion that a Yoshev is not Mechuyev Misa B'dei Shamayim? Why don't we learn it out from Richot Yadayim, someone who wasn't Roichet Yadayim Reglayim, and who's Mechusa Begadim? So Shisu Yain Havelei Shlishi. It says also by someone who drinks before doing the avodah that he's going to be mechalal and it's mechuyev misa b'dei shamayim, which shloshel divrei hakol emenam. Everyone agrees. If you have three psukim telling you the same thing, that's definitely too much, and you can't learn it out to anywhere else. The Mishnah continued. A person has to be standing directly on the floor. A kohen has to be standing on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash when he does the avodah. If there's something interfering, if he's standing on top of kelim, which could be shoes or begadim, or agabe behema, he's on top of an animal, agabe ragli chaver, if he's standing on the feet of another kohen, and he does the avodah pasul. So on the Tanabri Bishmal, Hayel Beritzba Mekadesha, so Klishar Mekadshim. Since the floor of the Beis Hamikdash has a kedusha, like we're going to see later on, David HaMelech took two toidas and he circled around the Beis Hamikdash to be Mekadesh. So it was Mekadesh just like a Klisharis, and a Klisharis is a Mekadesh. Ma Klisharis lo yehei davar chaytes beinoi lebein kli. Like we said Legabi the Begadim that it says Al Psaroi, but we also have Psukim directly, I think, about a Klisharis as well, that there can't be anything between the Klisharis and the Kayin. So too, we said it bedafka legabi the Kabbalah of a Kayin. So av ritzba lo yehei davar chaytes beino lebein haritzba. So we'll say the same thing by the ritzba. Utzricha. Now the Gemara goes back to what we said in the Mishnah. We gave 3 examples of something being chaytes. Why do we need all these different examples? The Yashmin and Kli, if we would have just said a Kli, that if a Kli is in between the Kayin and the floor, Mishum Delav Mino de Basar, that's a foreign object. So that makes sense that it's chaytes. Avo behema de Mino de Basaru emeloi. Maybe a behema, since it's also a form of flesh, like a person, so maybe that doesn't interfere. V'yashmin behema de loy mina de adamu avo chaveroi de adamu emeloi. That's why we need all 3. Doesn't really explain why we don't just say Adam, but it's Leizu Afsu, which we find often the way a Mishnah is constructed. Tanya Eliezer Oimer, Ragle Achas ala Kli, V'Ragle Achas ala Ritzpla. If he had one foot on top of a Kli, for example, a shoe, and one foot is on the floor, it's on a stone, a separate stone, not part of the floor. The other one's on the floor as it's supposed to be. Royan, if you were to take away the thing on the one foot that's in between his foot and the floor, he would still be able to stand and do the avodah, then it's kosher. If not, it's possible. Boy Rabami, nidaldulo ha'evan. If there was an evan that was loosened from the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, v'amar aleh, and he stands in it. Mao, what's it in? So if it became loose and it has to be thrown out and they have to get a new stone, then it's certainly not part of the floor. It's a chatzitza, and the avodah is not going to be good. Where his intention is to reinstall, where they intend to reinstall that stone. So what's it then? Since the intention is to reattach it as if it's already attached. Or do we say, in the meantime, it's still unattached, even though the intention is later to attach it. So we're going to say it's going to be a chatzitz. Rabbi Zuti boy lahachi. He had a slightly different version of the question. Boy Ravami nekra evan. If the evan, one of the stones that make up the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, was uprooted, for Amad bim kaima, and he stood not on the evan, but rather in the place where the evan used to be, on the earth, underneath the stone. Mao, my kami boile. What's his question? Ki kaddish David ritzpel yoina kaddish idoma ad la'arid itohaima kaddish. His question is when David was Makadish the floor, was he only Makadish the stones that make up the actual floor, or was Makadish everything that was included, that up down to the depths of the earth? Rashi explains over here, Ki Kaddish David Shay Makadish Oiz B'Shtei Toidus B'Shir Shapagoyim Ketnab Mesech Shavuos. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Shavuos was a long time ago. I personally don't, so don't feel bad. But in any case, the question is, how far down does that Kiddush of David HaMelech extend? Frag the Gemara, why do we ask the question where there was a stone uprooted and he put his foot into that spot? Why doesn't he just ask if the stone was taken away and all that's left is the earth? Is that going to be considered a kosher avodah? No. Certainly we understand that when David was Makadish, he's Makadish everything down to the center of the earth. And it's all Kaddish. The question is, when a stone is uprooted and you're working with your foot on a hole in the ground, is that not the way to do shiras? Is that not the proper way of service? And on that, we say teku. The Gemara is going to come on the next block. We're going to talk about different things where a person does an avodah in different ways with his.
So why didn't we ask what the whole Azara according to this?
Was it because that's certainly okay? Because that's not a problem of derech shiras. Because right, that's the ground. But if you have a floor and then you're sticking your hand into your foot and you're standing in a hole in the floor, that's we say it's not respectable. It's not a proper way to do something. You're doing avodah, it has to be done in a distinguished manner. So this is not derech shiras. This is lacking in propriety. So Rashi derech shiras bakach mi havi oirach aro mikri shiras ola. Is it considered a normal way to do things? You have to do avodah in a proper way. So Gemara, we said the next thing we said in the Mishnah is kibol b'smoil pasol Rav Shimon machshir. We had a machlokes without any explanation. In the Mishnah, we said if you do the Kabbalah, right, when the dam comes out of the behema, it has to be caught, right? You shech the behema, and the first avodah that Adam is to catch the dam in a kli sharf. He's supposed to be mekabel it in a kli with his right hand, but he did it with his left hand. It's possible. Rav Shimon machshir. Rav Shimon says it's kosher. We're going to see soon what the reason of Rav Shimon is. Tana Rabban. We darshan be'etzba v'lokach. The Torah says it's all coming from the pasuk that says v'lokach hakayim midam achatas. This is talking about the avodah of a carbon chatas. So the kohen takes the dam achatas be'etzboi with his finger, v'nosan al karnos mizbeach, and he places it on the corners, on the horns of the mizbeach, the protuberances on the top of the mizbeach. If you remember, this is unique about the chatas, that unlike the other kabbanas that you zayrik the dam on the bottom part of the mizbeach, the chatas, it gets smeared with the finger of the kohen on the top. So it says two things. It says v'lokach and it says v'nosan. Zok the Gemara, be'etzba v'lokach. Since it says v'lokach, that's the originally getting the dam. Since we use the lashon of etzba, that tells you it's only biyamin. As Rashi explains, and the Gemara is going to say a little bit later that this is a Gzeira Shava by Motzei. We have, it says that a Yad and an Etzba refer to the right hand and the right Etzba. We look at them as interchangeable. So since it says Be'etzba v'lokach, so we just like by Motzei, it's the right hand, the right finger. So over here also when it says v'lokach, relating to the Etzba, it means with the right finger. The etzba v'nosan, and then it says placing it on the mizbech. It tells you that the placing of the dam on the mizbech should also be done only with the right hand. This is the first part of the brayso. So Reb Shimon objects to this. Does it say yad b'kabbalah? Does it say when he takes it that it's b'yad? Ela be'etzbay. It only says be'etzbay v'nosan. Shleitei nesina ela b'yamin. Doesn't say anything about a yad by the Kabbalah. It just says that when he places with his finger, it should be v'nasa. Since it doesn't say yad b'Kabbalah, when he's mekabel with his hand, the Kabbalah can even be with his left hand, and it's kosher. Now, all this is very hard to understand, right? What happened? I jumped a little bit by telling you about the Gzeira Shava, but at this point, the Gemara is totally mystified by what Rav Shimon just said. Rav Shimon, what does he hold? If he holds of a Gzeira Shava to Motzei, if it, what was he saying? If he doesn't hold of the Gzeira Shava, so it doesn't make a difference whether you say Yad or Etzba, whatever one it is. He seemed to be saying that it doesn't say the word Yad relating to Kabbalah. As we're going to see later on, the question is going to be whether we're Dirish La'achrav or La'fanav. It says the Etzba in middle, and that could be referring to the part before or the part after, the Kicho or the Nesina. But the Gemara is asking, we have a bigger problem. If he doesn't, if he holds of the Gzeira Shava, then Kilei Nemer Yad B'Kabbalah might have it. What do I care that it didn't say Yad B'Kabbalah, it said Etzba? That's good enough. Be less like Gzeira Shava, Ki Nemer Yad B'Kabbalah might have it. And if he doesn't hold the Gzeira Shava, doesn't help that it says Yad B'Kabbalah. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda, La'olam less like Gzeira Shava. Rabbi Yehuda first tries like going like this. Rav Shimon doesn't hold the Gzeira Shava. V'hachi kama. V'chi nemer Yad Yamin B'Kabbalah. Hayav nemer Yad Yamin B'Kabbalah. Kabbalah b'smel kasher. Since it doesn't say Yad Yamin, it just said Yad, and we don't have a Gzeira Shava. So this is no reason to say you need a right hand. It could even be the left hand. The Gemara says this is also doesn't make any sense. Amalei Rab, Ihachi, Afilu Nesinami. First of all, if you're saying there's no Gzeira Shava, so how do you know the second part, that Nesina, that Zrik putting the dam on the base, on the Mizbeach, needs to be with his right hand? Also, you're saying if Rav Shimon doesn't hold the Gzeira Shava, but I can show you black and white that she does hold the Gzeira Shava. But Tanya Rav Shimon, he says we make a Gzeira Shava from Motzei to both Yad or Etzba, which in this pasuk it actually said Etzba. It didn't say, but he's clearly saying he holds to the Gzeira Shava and it should apply, and it is. So why wouldn't it apply just as much to the Velokach as it does to the Venosan in the pasuk, right? Because we're not disputing. Rav Shimon doesn't seem to be disputing. The Gemara will get to this later, but at this point, when he doesn't seem to be disputing that putting the dam on the Mizbeach has to be done with the right hand. So how are you coming up with the distinction if the pasuk says both Velokach and Nosan, and it says Etzba, and he holds of the Gzeira Shava? Elo Marah. Finally, we're going to get to something that will have a little bit of order. Lo'ilam Islay Gzeira Shava. He holds of Gzeira Shava. Hachi kama. V'chi nemra yad b'Kabbalah. Hayav loy nemra yad b'Kabbalah ela etzba. V'efshel l'Kabbalah b'etzba. Since it uses the lashon of etzba. And what is Kabbalah? Kabbalah means that you hold a kli, and the kli is mekabel the dam. But you can't hold a kli ostensibly with your finger. Kli has to be held with your hand. So the word etzba, even though it does mean biyamin, it's precluded from referring to Kabbalah because Kabbalah has to be with the whole hand. So kibbutz small is kosher. This is again rejected. Amalei Rav Sama Breder Rav Ashi Ravina after David Eisen L'Svas Mizrach Umakabel. You could put a handle. We all know you could hold a teacup with a single finger if you have a handle of the cup. So why can't the Klisharis have a handle? Hello, Ma'abaya. So what is the real discussion over here? There's a different machlaikas. Rav Shimon is saying their disagreement is whether you're Dairish a pasuk both to what's before it and after it. The Tanakama who says that both Kabbalah and the Nesinas Dam have to be Biyamin, he holds that a Mikras Nidrish both Lefanav and La'achav. Rav Shimon who says that only the Nesina has to be Biyamin, but not the Kabbalah, he holds that Mikras Nidrish only La'achrav and not Lefanav. So when it says Be'etzboi, that's only going on when it's Be'etzboi V'nosan, but it's not going on the Velok. Amr Abaya, Hadar Belazar Reb Shimon, Mafka Midavuo, Mafka Midaraban. Reb Elazar, who is the son of Reb Shimon, is a third Tana, and he disagrees with both of these Shitas. The Tanya, Reb Elazar Reb Shimon Oima, Kol Makom Shenemar Etzba B'Kabbalah, Shina B'Kabbalah Pasul. Wherever it says the word Etzba L'Gabe Kabbalah, if he does the Kabbalah, he does it in an unusual way, meaning with his left hand, it's going to be Pasul. B'Nesina, kosher. But since it only said it by Etzba, by Kabbalah, it's going to be possible. But by Nesina, it will still be kosher because it only said it by Kabbalah. Where do we find where do we find that it says Etzba Legabe the Nesina? This is a different pasuk. This is a pasuk, I believe, Legabe the Miluim. So, on that pasuk, it says it's set up a little differently than our original pasuk. It says first then it says and then afterwards it says etzba'echa. The Kasavar, and he holds Mikra Darish Lefanav Veloy Lefleifanav. So goes on the immediately preceding thing before etzba'echa, which v'nasat al karnas hamizbeach, but it doesn't go al lefneifanecha, two phrases before when it says v'lekachta midam apar. So he'll say only the Nesina is going to be possible. But and it also doesn't apply to the one that's after it. So therefore, he will say it goes. So he holds b'derech klal you go lefanov. So the gabi this case of the par, I think this is the par miluim. So we're going to say that it has to be done. The Kabbalah has to be done with the Yamin, and the Nesina does. The Kabbalah doesn't have to be done by Yamin, but the Nesina does because that's Lefanav. But in our case of a regular Chatas, where we said the Kabbalah is immediately beforehand, so Kabbalah would have to be with the right hand, Masha'eng, but the Nesinas Dam, which is afterwards, he holds you don't go la'achrav. So therefore, he would be neither like the Chachamim, who say both of them need to be, they go both lefanav and la'achrav, not like Rav Shimon, who said we only look at what's achrav. He'll say we only look at what's lefanav. I mean, in the case over there by Miluim, it also is relevant to say that it's not lefnei fanav, but he holds you go lefanav and not la'achrav. Amar Rabba Babachana Amar Rab Yochanan. Kol makom shenema etzba u kahuna einel ella yamin. Continues talking about this same topic. We brought a machlokes tanoim. Now we have a statement from an Amoira. He says whenever the pasuk says etzba and kahuna, it's referring to the right hand. Now, this is a little different than what we said before. This is a direct limud that we're learning from the Gzeira Shav. We're saying whenever it says those words, that has to be a min. So Gemara Kasal Kedait and Tartibin. At this point, we thought that it means you have to have both of those words. You have to say both etzba and kain. Like it says, the kain, and it says midam achatas be'etzbai. So this is our original pasuk by chatas, and it has both words. The yalef mimitzair, and we learn it out from Mitzayr. It says Lagabi the kain dipping his finger, so it has both kain and etzba, and it says his right finger. So Gemara, so it's a slightly different limud than what we had before, where we were saying we learn it out with the Gzeira Shava from where it said yad or etzba from the word yad or etzba. Over here we're saying it depends on having the word kayin and etzba. Correct, Gemara. Is this true that you need both of those things? Vari kmitza. By the kmitza, which is like we've said a number of times, the kmitza that you do by a mincha when the kayin takes the flour in his middle three fingers, which is the equivalent of the shchita by the avodas hadam of a carbon. Vari kmitza the loikse ba'ela kahuna. All it says by kmitza, it says ve'viel akayin v'kamatz akayin mimena maloi kumtzoi as askorosa v'hikter as beich alisha Hashem chatosi. It doesn't say the word etzba. Utnan kamatz b'smel pasul, and nevertheless, if you do kmitza with his left hand, it's pasul. So it doesn't make sense. How could you say you need both etzba and kuna? Ela amarava oy etzba oy kahuna. You have to have either one. Amalei Abaye, if that's the case, you need either only etzba or kahuna. Harei halacha sevarim lekevesh tichsiv b'hu kahuna. Legabi bringing the ivarim to the keves, meaning after you did avodas hadam, you have to bring the ivarim to be burnt by an oila, to be burnt on the mizbeach. And it says kahuna, it only says the word kahuna, utnan, and never, so it says kahuna, and it's talking about bringing the ivarim to the keves, utnan, a regal shel yamin b'smoiloi, ubeis ayra l'chutz. When the kain would carry the ivarim, the different limbs of the animal, he would carry the right foot of the animal b'smoiloi in his left hand. So you see the halachas evarim, hakravas evarim could be done even with his left hand. It says ubeis ayra l'chutz, he had to hold it in a certain way that would leave the side with the skin, not the side where the hole of where the shechita was, or where the limb was cut off. So, but you see that even something that says kahuna can be done with the left hand. So how could you say it's either one of the two? So he says, no, that which we say you need either etzba or kahuna, that's only on something that's ma'akav kabara, that if you don't do it at all, it would passel. Do you do mitzayra? Like a mitzayra that you have to do, the avoid of the mitzayra that's being described as something that's necessary. If you don't do it, the mitzayra is not going to be mitar. And now over here we're talking about hakravas, bringing the ivarim, and bringing the ivarim is already after avodas hadam, after the zrika, and at that point nothing is ma'akav anymore. The person already got his kaparav. So on that, you need both. You either need both etzba kahuna or even both etzba and kahuna don't help. I'm not really sure. So you're saying that anything that's ma'akiv, then you have either kabbalah, either kahuna, or etzba is enough to make it no good, to be mechal. What about kabbalah? Nichsibuhu kahuna. It says kahuna. Is that no? I'm sorry, that's not. I don't know why it's. Oh, I'm reading the wrong. Shachar is ben abakal of Hashem. I mixed the vav with the zayin. Shachar is ben abakal of Hashem. Rekibum ne'aron hakoyinim es hadam v'zarku es hadam al mizbeach saviv asher pesach hayom moed. So it says Aaron hakoyinim. It says kahuna, but it doesn't say etzba. And it's davar mahakav kaparuhu utnan kibbutz small possible. Rav Shimon machshir. Rav Shimon says it's kosher. So how are we going to understand that if you're saying it's a klal, that wherever it says kahuna, that's enough to say that it's ma'akav. So Gemara, Rav Shimon tarti boy. Rav Shimon requires both of them, and that's the reason why he'll say that Kabbalah it's not going to be possible when you do it bismut.
What about that first pasuk that we had on Amud Aleph?
I think that was a different Amayra's explanation of Reb Shimon.
Uh-huh.
I think so. Right? Who did we quote on Amud Aleph?
You do have the pasuk. I mean,
yeah, I guess Amr Yehuda. But it's still Amoraim who say how to analyze that Gzeir Shava. I mean, that was really the Gzeir Shava, and the question is where you go with that Gzeir Shava. How do you analyze the Machlaikas? So Gemara Rav Shimon Tarti boy. In fact, the Gemara mi boy Rav Shimon Tarti, is it true that Rav Shimon really requires both Kahuna and Etzba Vatan Rav Shimon Aima? Kamakim shenemer Yad Ene Eli Yamin. Whenever it says Yad, it always refers to the Yamin. Etzba Ene Eli Yamin. So you're saying very clearly that all it has to do is say Yad or Etzba, which are the equivalent, and that's enough. And Zak the Gemara, Etzba le boy Kahuna boy Etzba. Rav Shimon holds that you need the word, if it says etzba, that's enough. But if it says kahuna, it also has to say etzba. So Gemara asks the obvious question, elakayin lamali. If that's the case, what does it have to say kahuna? What is it teaching you? It really depends on the etzba part. Bigihunan, it's coming to tell you that they have to be wearing the kayin, according to Rav Shimon, is to tell you that you have to be wearing big day kahuna. So even though it says kayin legabi the Kabbalah Saddam, he says it still is going to be kosher bismut. In fact, the Marvar is rika delay kasabu ella kahuna. The Gemara says the mashmayis from Reb Shimon from our Mishnah that he says Kabbalah bismail is kosher. It's mashma that zrika is going to require yamin. Otherwise, he should have argued about zrika as well. Zrika delay kasabu ella kahuna utnan zark bismail pasel the loy polig Reb Shimon. It says even though we don't actually have a Mishnah, the Mefarshim point out, but it's the mashmais is from our Mishnah that our Mishnah never said that Zarek B'Smoil is Rav Shimon says is kosher. Amar Rabaya Polig B'Braisa. We have a Braisa where Rav Shimon is chaylik even on Zrika. The Tanya Ki B'Smoil Pasel Rav Shimon Machsher. Zarek B'Smoil Pasel Rav Shimon Machsher. He's taka Machsher by the Zrika B'Smoil. Elohab Sfek Gemara Hadamar Yad L'Kmitza. Regel L'Chalitza. Oizen L'Ritzia. We learn Rava has a different limud to learn out the Gzeir Shava from by Netzaira. It says so he darshans from the 3 times the pasuk says the words Hayemanis. It's a slightly different Gzeir Shava. He says we learn out 3 things from the repetition of Hayemanis. 3 times it tells you to learn out that you need Yamin on something else. So they say Yad tells you Kmitza. From the Yad, we learn that Kmitza has to be Yamin. Regel L'Chalitza. That tells you Chalitza when if a brother decides not to be Miyabim his brother's wife after his death, the woman takes his shoe from his foot it says it has to be the right foot because of the regel from Mitzayra. Oizen l'ritzia, when you do ritzia on a Evet Ivri who wants to stay with his Adon, when you make a hole in his ear, it has to also be his right ear. So, what do we have to have this extra Hayamanis 3 times to learn out Kmitza that it has to be Biyamin? Why can't we learn out from Rabbi Babachana? Because we said it says over there, it says Etzba. I'm sorry, it doesn't say Etzba, it says Kayin. Right, because it says kahuna, and that's the davar that is ma'aka. Zaktamara, chad lekaimitz. One is to tell you that the kmitz itself has to be done with the right hand, and chad lekiddush kaimitz. And the other one is to tell you that when you're taking the kmitza after he does the kmitza, which is similar to the shchita, and then he places it into a kli, that has to also be done. The kli has to be held in the right hand when he places it into the kli. Practically moral of Shimon, but we have a zaitika problem. We're trying to understand Rav Shimon. Well, Rav Shimon delay by kiddush kaimitz. First of all, according to Rav Shimon, who doesn't hold, he holds you don't need to put the kli. You don't have to put the silas of the kmitza into a kli. You can just take it and put it directly on the mizbeach. Well, the manda amal of Shimon nami boikish, and even though there's one mandam who says that even according to Shimon you have to put it into a kli. Kaimitz mispalach shuri mechshuri. He happens to hold, even if he holds you do need a kli, he holds that you can be mekadesh that kaimitz with your left hand. So you can't say the extra pasuk according to Rav Shimon is coming to tell you kiddush kaimitz, because either he holds you don't need kiddush kli at all, and even if he does hold, he holds you can do it with your left hand, so that the pasuk can't be telling you that it has to be with the right hand. Yad yad the Rav Lamli. So tomorrow ilik mitza atzma the Yehuda breder of Chia nafka. The Yehuda breder of Chia. My time of the Rabbi Shimon the Amakra kiddush kadashim he kakatas ukashim. Bolo I've the biyad I've the bimin kakatas. There's 2 choices of the way to do. The pasuk says the gabi the kaimitz. It says the kaimitz, the mincha is like a chatas asham, and it's coming to tell you if he's going to do it with his hand, you have to do it with your right hand, kechatas. But if he does it with a kli, then he can do it with his left hand as asham. So what do you need it? What is the pasuk needed for? You don't need it for kaimitz atzma. We need it for something else. We need it for kaimitz of a minchas chayta, a mincha of someone who is bringing his chatas, a chatas, I think, of a oil of a yared, that he has the option to bring a mincha. Since we say that there's no, he holds there's no levina on a minchas chayta, it doesn't have the extra flourishes that a regular mincha has, because it's not a happy thing. You're bringing a chatas for doing something wrong, so it's supposed to be done in a less ostentatious way. Maybe kikametz labispoel nami tiskasher. I might think that maybe doing it with the left hand of a minchas chayta would be kosher. Kamashmalan. So that's what we need the pasuk for, to tell you that even a minchas chayta, in spite of its less elevated reason for coming to be, it still needs to be done with the right hand. Okay, we'll stop over here. Bez Hashem tomorrow.